Okay, let's unpack this. Imagine looking in the mirror one morning and seeing a reflection that is, well, undeniably you. But somehow it's also like looking at a complete stranger. That's precisely where our deep dive begins today, right there, in that surprising, kind of disorienting moment of transformation. We're going to explore the unexpected emotional landscape that can open up when your body changes, particularly after significant weight loss.
Mhm.
And your mind, well, it struggles to keep pace.
It's a huge shift, isn't it? A really profound one. Our mission today really is to help you understand what happens in that space. We've been diving into a collection of notes and the really fascinating ideas of Dan Hollis. He's actually coined a truly insightful term for this whole phenomenon, identity lag.
Hmm.
And this isn't just about the physical journey, right? It's about what happens when the very ground beneath your emotional feet sort of shifts.
Yeah, exactly. And what's particularly interesting, I think, is how this internal uh, recalibration, how it can be amplified when tools like semaglutide kind of quiet the usual noise, that constant hunger chatter. We want to guide you through what Dan calls this quiet window to help you understand the real questions that start to surface when those old hungers fade. And maybe something more honest begins to arrive.
You know, for a lot of people, this journey can start in the most unexpected ways, almost mundane moments sometimes. Take Adrienne, for example. She's 53. And for 12 years, she hadn't taken a full body photo of herself. Now she'd been on semaglutide for months, her appetite had lowered, her knees, hurt less, her clothes were starting to fit better.
So, okay, on the surface, everything sounds great, like a total success story.
Yeah.
But then she's brushing her teeth one morning, looks up, and just doesn't recognize the woman staring back at her. Her face was thinner, the lines sharper. I can only imagine that feeling. What did she actually tell Dan Hollis about that specific moment?
She told him, and this is quite powerful, I knew it was me, but I didn't feel like I belonged to her. Just this really potent, almost haunting feeling of disconnection. And Dan Hollis describes this exact experience as identity lag. He explains that your body can change faster than your story, and when that happens, the soul gets confused.
Wow. That's a really striking observation because most people, probably myself included, might assume the hardest part is the physical stuff, losing the weight. But it sounds like Dan's work really highlights that the real crisis for many people often comes after that physical transformation. What actually shifts in that aftermath?
Precisely. That's exactly it. It's when that familiar physical hunger starts to fade and those, long-held rituals around food begin to dissolve. Suddenly you're left feeling, well, unrecognizable, even to yourself in this new body. Adrienne wasn't really mourning the pounds she'd shed. She was mourning the version of herself who had carried them, the self she knew how to be.
The version who maybe managed a room with a joke to deflect attention, or always knew which sweaters covered the most or which apologies sounded casual enough. She basically developed an entire identity around her old self. And now, here she was, a body in transition, sure, but a mind, sort of, without a map.
Yeah.
That sounds like a profound challenge.
It truly is, yeah. And what's so insightful about Dan Hollis's approach, I think, is that he didn't rush her. No quick fixes, no platitudes. He simply listened. He validated her experience. He told her the weight loss is just the clearing. The becoming takes longer. And this really gets to the core of understanding that quiet window that something like semaglutide can provide.
Okay, so if that physical hunger, that sort of constant background noise of craving, is quieted by semaglutide, for instance, what does Dan say actually comes to the surface in that quiet window? Is it about recognizing a different kind of hunger? Something deeper?
That's exactly it, yeah. When the physical hunger is dampened, other things, they get a chance to emerge. Dan puts it beautifully, I think. Emotional hunger sounds like a craving, but it's actually a question, a need asking to be seen. Semaglutide, whether it's Ozempic or Wegovy, it works as a GLP-1 receptor agonist. It literally quiets those hunger signals in the brain. But Dan warns us, right, it's not a fix for emotional eating. It's more like a biological pause, a window. If food was your emotional scaffolding, let's say, and that gets pulled out, well, you're going to feel exposed.
Yeah, that exposure, that can feel incredibly vulnerable, can it?
Yeah.
So how does Dan guide people to navigate that discomfort? Is it about confronting those questions head on, even if they're, painful?
It is, yeah, that's the core of it. The real work, as he teaches it, begins by separating what he calls signal confusion. It's about learning to observe the craving, not just instinctively obey it, to pause, to try and decode what that hunger truly means, and understand what need is really asking to be met underneath it all.
That sounds like it requires a lot of introspection. self-awareness. It's interesting because he's not, anti-medication at all. Sometimes you see that in these kinds of conversations. He seems to embrace it as a tool.
Absolutely not anti-medication, no. In
Mm.
fact, he really emphasizes that the real strength of semaglutide is the time it provides. Time to reflect, time to reset, maybe time to rewire some of those internal responses. He often says, semaglutide isn't the solution to emotional eating, it's the silence that lets you find one.
Hmm.
And that silence, yeah, it can be uncomfortable, definitely. But it's also incredibly clarifying. It's about recognizing that often emotional hunger is really a symptom of identity disconnection. When we kind of lose track of who we are, food can become a substitute for that missing piece.
Right. So if you've used food to fill various emotional gaps, maybe, or just to cope, what happens when those gaps are suddenly exposed and the usual coping mechanism isn't as readily available or doesn't have the same pull? This really shifts the entire paradigm, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. And Dan's a really profound insight here, I think, is that you don't hold on to weight loss with just sheer discipline. You hold on to it with alignment. It's about replacing the old story, not just the snack you reach for. Now, for someone who has relied on really strict discipline for years, that can feel like, well, a complete paradigm shift. It's challenging, definitely, because it moves beyond just rules and willpower into this deeper space of self-inquiry and permission.
Okay, so back to Adrienne. With her, they didn't just focus on calories or strict exercise plans. Instead, you said they got to work on language. How did that practically play out for her? What kind of language were they actually rewriting?
Well, they started by literally renaming some of the emotions and concepts she was wrestling with. It's quite fascinating. Shame, for example, became memory, just a memory of a past feeling or experience. Control became curiosity, discipline became alignment, like we just discussed. And this wasn't just, mental renaming. It involved specific exercises Dan guided her through. Things like journaling to reframe past experiences or practicing new physical behaviors. Things that aligned with her evolving self-image, how she wanted to feel in her new body.
Right. And so week by week, as Adrienne started to kind of embody this new language, this new approach,
Yeah.
how did that affect her relationship with herself?
Yeah.
In this quiet window you mentioned.
She began to fill in her new frame, essentially, but not with food or with fear, but with permission. Permission to not quite know who she was yet, permission to be awkward in that in-between space, and permission to build a new story without feeling like she had to, burn the old one down entirely. The mirror itself didn't change, obviously, but the way she greeted her reflection, that changed. She started actually standing there longer, truly seeing herself, maybe for the first time in years.
So you've heard today how this journey of transformation, especially with body changes, it really extends far beyond just the physical, doesn't it? It's really about navigating what Dan Hollis calls that identity lag, that space where your body changes faster than your story, your sense of self can catch up. If you're on this path, or maybe considering it, remember, semaglutide isn't some magic pill,
Yeah.
but it can be a miracle pause. That's a great way to put it. It's a chance, really, to ask yourself, okay, what am I truly hungry for now that food isn't filling in all the gaps? What actually needs my support?
Exactly. And the real work, as Dan constantly reminds us, isn't about judgment or rules. It's not about being hard on yourself. It's about empathy, it's about awareness, and it's about curiosity. This is the quiet window. You're not behind. You're actually just beginning.
Mm. And perhaps the most profound question for you to maybe mull over after this deep dive is this. If you've ever looked in the mirror and felt, the shape was right, but maybe the soul felt missing, if your reflection has ever felt more like a stranger than a home, what new story are you ready to permit yourself to write without needing to burn the old one down so that you can truly finally belong to yourself again?